Kia ora, and welcome to another video celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020. This is intended as a platform to share diverse experiences and information, and we hope that you find this series supportive and informative. It is important to note that these are personal stories and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women's Health Action or our funders. Please seek advice from your health professional before making any important decisions about infant or young child feeding.
Hello and welcome to my presentation. It's called Welcome to Your Breasts. Now I'm going to guess that a grown-up has suggested that you watch this, and that might have been a little bit awkward and a little bit embarrassing because sometimes talking about breasts can be a little bit awkward, and that's something we're going to talk about during this presentation today. Looking at that picture, breasts come in lots of different shapes and sizes. It's really normal for breasts to look very different from the kinds of breasts that you might see in magazines or on posters or in advertising. We are all so different. And in fact, just one person can have two different breasts. Did you know that? We can have two differently shaped breasts. They don't always look exactly the same. They're not always symmetrical. But we don't always know that because people are usually wearing bras or clothing and it's not always obvious. Now, I'm not saying that your breasts are going to look like any of these, but this diagram just represents some of the variation that we're going to be seeing as we get older. I'm guessing you're between about 8 and 13 years old. You might be a little bit younger or you might be a little bit older. And you may be just about starting to enter the world of breasts, or perhaps your breasts developed a few months ago or a few years ago. Or you might be a parent and you might be getting ready to talk to somebody in your life about their breast development. So we're going to be talking about breast development, we're going to be talking about what's normal, we're going to be talking about what breasts are for. So first of all, a little bit about me. There I am in my colourful glasses. My name's Emma and I'm based in London in the UK. I was a teacher for many years and I used to teach sex education. I'm also a parent. Those are my two children at the bottom. They don't look like that now. They're actually much older. So my son is 16 and my daughter is 12 and she's entering the world of breasts. I'm also a writer. I've written a book called The Breast Book, which is all about breasts. And I spoke to a lot of people when I was getting ready to write that book, girls and teenagers and mums and ladies that weren't mums. And I'm also a lactation consultant, which means that I support mums and families with breastfeeding and with feeding their babies. So I talk a lot about breasts. Breasts are pretty much my life. I cannot deny it. So hopefully I'll be a useful person to guide you through the next half hour or so. I'm also involved with a charity called the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, and we support mums and families in the UK and answer questions on the National Breastfeeding Helpline. One day, this might be you. Now, I'm not saying you're going to dye your baby's hair blue to match your own blue hair, but what I'm saying is one day you might be a mum. That might feel like it's a long way off. When you're a mum, you may not breastfeed your baby, or you may breastfeed your baby. But either way, you are going to enter a world where babies are being fed, where breasts are all around you, where your friends and your sisters and your aunts and your colleagues have breasts, where your babies in your life are getting fed by breasts. So even if this isn't going to be you, it's really good to know about the world of breasts and know how breasts and breastfeeding work. We often grow up in a society where we don't talk about breastfeeding very much. Breastfeeding is often something that happens away from the public eye. It's often something that happens at home. We don't necessarily see it a lot, but it is actually all around us. It's often around us and we just don't notice it's there because we might think that the person on the table across from us in the cafe is actually just holding their baby, but quite often people are feeding their babies without us even noticing. And in this diagram you will notice there are some people that may look like they're just holding their baby, but actually they're probably breastfeeding them, because babies need to feed just like we need to feed. We go to cafes and we have coffee and we have cake and we have a meal out. Babies need to feed as well. And breastfeeding is not just about food. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. There are lots of other reasons why babies like to breastfeed. So it's good to know how our bodies grow. It's good to know how breasts work, because when we know those things, it helps us to feel more confident, not just as a mum, but also as a grown-up woman as well. So this is me doing my growing up. There I am wearing my little funky white outfit. I'm pretty sure that my family never looked that clean again, because my dad actually was a pig farmer, so I'm pretty sure he never looked that clean again. And there's me in the middle, I'm about 4 or 5 years old, and there's me at the end, I'm about 12. And in those pictures, throughout that time, from when I was a baby until I was about 12, nobody talked to me about breasts. Nobody talked to me about how breasts grow and about how breasts change. My breasts came along and I hadn't had one conversation about breast development. And I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want that to happen to you as a young person. When I was at school, we had sex education. And in sex education, we often looked at a picture a bit like that picture on the left, the one that looks a bit like a deer antlers. We often looked at pictures of fallopian tubes and uteruses and vaginas, and we talked about how babies were made. Now, in that picture, you can see the pink bit in the middle that's a bit of a triangle shape. That's the womb or the uterus. That's where the baby's going to live while it's growing and developing. And then underneath the uterus, we've got the vagina. And then at the edges, we've got those two things that look a little bit like eggs, and at the end of the fallopian tubes. And those are the ovaries where our eggs are made. Can you see those tiny little black dots? That represents the eggs developing. And when a baby's made, one of those tiny little eggs will move down through the fallopian tube, down towards the womb, and it will join with a little seed called a sperm, and then a baby will start to be made. We learn about that in our sex education lessons, but quite often we don't learn about breast development and how breasts change. And breasts are also part of sex education and also part of our bodies getting ready for babies. When I was at school, I did biology until I was about 16 years old. And I drew that picture of the heart in the middle 100 times, 1,000 times. I drew pictures of heart diagrams over and over again, but no one had ever spoken to me about breast development or what breasts look like. So there's a breast on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, not everyone's breasts look like this. This person's got pink skin, pale skin. Lots of people have darker skin, so they might have darker areolas. Nipples and areolas come in different sizes as well. That word areola, I'll talk to you in a minute about what I'm talking about. Let's talk about some of the words inside the breast. So we've got that yellow stuff at the back. That's the fatty tissue, because breasts are made from lots of fat. There's a lot of fat inside a breast. That's actually what most of a breast is. But then we've also got, can you see these wires? They look like blue and red wires. That represents the blood vessels that take oxygen to the important part of the breast and take the carbon dioxide away. And then can you see we've got these things that look a little bit like grapes? Those are the lobes or the lobules where milk is made. And from the bottom of the lobule, you've got that tube, that milk duct that goes into the nipple. And then if a baby was feeding, the baby's mouth would be over the nipple and the milk would be going into the baby's mouth. And the nipple, I'm guessing you probably are familiar with that word nipple, because that's a word you might hear a bit more often. The nipple at the very end is where the milk comes out. Now in that picture, it looks like there's just one hole. But did you know that nipples don't just have one hole where the milk comes out? Lots of people have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even more little holes. So nipples look a little bit more like a shower head with milk trickling out than just having one hole where the milk comes out. And then around the nipple, we've got that coloured circle, and that's the areola. That coloured circle around the outside of the nipple is called the areola. Now, sometimes that's pronounced in different ways. Sometimes it's called the areola, sometimes it's called the areola. I say areola. It's a bit of a clue that we don't talk about it very much if we don't all agree to pronounce it the same way. I think we all say heart in the same way, don't we? Everyone says lungs and nose in the same way. The fact we don't all know how to say areola is a bit of a clue that we don't talk about it enough. So you've got the nipple in the middle, and that will look very different from person to person. Some people's nipples will be longer, some people's nipples will be flatter, some people will have nipples that sort of sink in a little bit. That's called an inverted nipple. Nipples will change during your life at different stages in your life. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So you've got the areola, this coloured circle, and that also can look very different. Sometimes it can be much wider and take up a big section of the breast. Sometimes it can be hardly seen at all. And everyone's got those milk producing clusters of lobules. Everyone's got that fatty tissue, but the fatty tissue will vary a lot because that's the bit that actually controls how big or small your breast is. So people with bigger breasts will have a lot more of the fatty tissue than people with smaller breasts, but lots of people have milk producing cells even if they don't have a lot of fatty tissue. So even if your breasts are smaller, that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have a lot of milk producing tissue. We also have different amounts of milk ducts. So we have 2 lungs and we have 2 eyes, but not everybody has the exact same number of milk ducts or the exact same number of lobules. So some people will have about 20 or 25 milk ducts. Some people will have maybe as few as 4 or 5 milk ducts. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make less milk for your baby. You may find that the milk just has to be taken out a bit more frequently, but people make the same amount of milk during the day. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So when tiny babies are growing, if you look at this picture, we can see some of the different shapes that babies go through in their lives. As babies are growing inside their mum's womb, they will go through different stages of development. And breasts are so important that we start growing breasts when we're as little as 4 weeks old. You may only be 4 millimeters big. And if you look at your tiny fingernail on your little finger, that's probably about 4 millimeters across. That's how big a baby is when they start to develop breasts. Because breasts are so important to human beings that we actually start to develop breasts even before we start to develop legs and arms and eyes. Because as mammals, we're going to need those breasts. We know that they're really important. And then when you're born, when you come out of your mum's tummy, you will not change again. Your breasts will not change again for quite a few years. So when you're a tiny, tiny baby inside your mum, your milk ducts will start to form, your milk producing cells will start to form, and then your breasts go quiet. So all the time that you're a toddler, you're learning to eat, you're learning to walk, you're learning to speak, you're starting school, your breasts don't do anything. They just stay flat, they're not waking up. But then when you get to about 8 years old, now it's going to be different for everybody, but when you get to about 8 years old, which is for a lot of people the beginning of puberty, things will start to wake up again. Now, puberty happens at very different ages. For some people, they may start to notice their breasts beginning to wake up again when they're around 8 years old. For some people, it may be more like 13 or 14 years old. There's a lot of different ages that this happens. So if you're a little bit older and you don't feel that you've changed, your breasts haven't changed, that isn't necessarily something to worry about. Sometimes it's worth talking to your mum, because if she was somebody who didn't see her breasts change until she was a little bit older, it may be the same for you. And our breasts very slowly, really slowly, will start to change because we're getting messages from hormones. Our brain has sent messages to our ovaries where the eggs are made and said, okay, this person is ready to start growing a bit more now. This person is ready to start to become an adolescent. They're ready for puberty. And you may notice that when your breasts first start to change, you just notice that one nipple starts to feel a bit tingly. You might notice there's a little bump behind that nipple, and it might start to form into what we call a breast bud. Just like flowers have buds before the flowers grow and develop, we have breast buds as our breasts are starting to bud. You might find that you only have one side that starts to change before the other. That's really normal. That word symmetrical, that's a word you'll know from maths, and that's about 2 things being the same on each side. Breasts are often not exactly symmetrical, especially at the beginning when they're starting to grow. You might have one breast that grows before the other side starts to grow. Sometimes our breast buds feel a little bit tender as well, a little bit sore. You might feel a little bit uncomfortable if you're playing roughly, or if someone bumps into them, that's normal too. And then as each month goes by, the hormones take it in turns to work on different bits of your breasts. So they might work on the milk ducts, they might work on the milk producing cells, and your breast will begin to grow. You might go through a phase where the areola and the nipple stick out a little bit, and you get like a sort of second hill, like that fourth picture along. And then at the end, often the areola will sink back down again, and you'll be left with your breast shape. Your breast may not look anything like that last breast in the picture, but this just kind of represents the sort of stages that you go through. We are all unique. We're all different. No one looks exactly the same. So as each month goes by in your adolescence, in your puberty, your breasts will change just very, very slowly. You may not even notice it month by month. And then when you get to the end of your puberty, and that's going to be different ages for different people again, some people's breasts will stop growing when they're 14, 15. Some people's breasts will stop growing when they're 17, 18. When you get to that point, you're going to pause again. We're going to have another pause, and we're not going to change very much until another phase in our life happens. Now, that's not to say that your breasts don't feel something as you go from month to month, because when you're a woman and your periods have started, you do go through phases in the month where you feel your breasts feel a bit different. They might feel a little bit tender sometimes. Sometimes they might feel a bit fuller. But they don't continue growing. They don't get bigger and bigger and bigger forever and ever. And then when your breasts are fully developed, just to remind you again what the anatomy looks like, in this picture you can see that this person's got a lot more milk ducts than that first picture. This woman has got more like the sort of 20 milk ducts that we talked about at the beginning. So again, we've got that fatty tissue, we've got the milk producing areas, the lobules, we've got the milk ducts that go down towards the nipple, and then behind that fatty tissue area, we've got the muscles of the chest wall, and we've got the ribs as well. So this woman is fully developed, and at different times in the month, she may feel her breasts feel a bit fuller or feel a bit more tender, but her breasts are not going to grow again now until she gets into pregnancy, that we'll talk about in a bit more in a minute. Sometimes breasts are a bit confusing because we get sent all these funny messages about breasts. Breasts seem to be something to do with sexiness and being sexy, and that is not comfortable when you're a child and you're just growing and you're not yet a grown-up. That can feel a bit weird. Sometimes breasts are used in advertising. They might be in magazines, they might be on billboards, and you might be sent these messages about what your body should look like. And even from a really young age, these kinds of messages can be really unhelpful because it makes us think that our bodies don't fit what we see in advertising or on Instagram. That's another place where you'll see lots of bodies and lots of images that may not look like us. And throughout history, women have been told that they're supposed to be a certain shape. You know, in the Victorian era, women were wearing corsets and tying themselves up really tightly to make their bodies a certain shape. Sometimes bras have been pointy to make our nipples like sort of points and cones. Sometimes bras have been pulling our breasts up and making them flat and doing all sorts of funny things. So we don't always get helpful messages about our breasts. So sometimes as we grow up, one of the most important parts of growing up is understanding what's real and what's not real. And looking at the images that we see around us and saying, you know what, that's not what real people look like. That's not what my sister, not what my friend, not what my teacher, not what my neighbor looks like. And that's okay because we're all different. Also, as you get older, you might hear messages about bras. That's another thing that we get told. We get told that everyone's supposed to wear a bra, but that's not actually true. When I was researching for my book, I talked to lots of people who never wore a bra in their lives. And I talked to lots of people that started to wear a bra when they were younger, and then they stopped because they didn't want to. You get to choose when you wear a bra. Lots of people, when they do wear a bra for the first time, we'll make sure that they choose something that's really comfortable, something that's made from soft material, that's not going to be too restricting. We don't want anything that makes you feel squashed or sore or uncomfortable. But you don't have to wear a bra until you're ready. And you don't have to wear one at all if you don't want to. So if you think you might be ready to wear a bra, that first conversation can be a little bit awkward, can be a little bit embarrassing to say, excuse me, I think we need to go bra shopping. You might want to write it in a note rather than say it out loud if that's a bit easier. You can buy bras online, they can be sent to your home and you can try them on and send back the ones you don't like. You don't necessarily have to go to a shop, and you have lots of different choices of lots of different fabrics. You don't have to wear a bra that looks like the kind of bra that your mum has. There are lots of different styles that you can choose from. So as I said before, your breasts grow during puberty, and then when you finish puberty, they go quiet for a little bit, and then they wake up again when pregnancy happens. So when you're pregnant, new hormones will come along that tell your body, okay, baby's coming, it's time to get the breasts ready. We're not just growing a baby in our tummy, we're making the breasts as well that will be used to feed the baby. And when we're pregnant, we will begin to make milk from about halfway through our pregnancy. Not everyone realizes that, but special milk starts to be made in your breasts weeks and weeks before baby's made. And that special milk is called colostrum. So some pregnant ladies will notice that they've got little bits of yellowy milk inside their bras, little bits of yellowy milk on the ends of their nipples, getting ready for baby to come. And then when baby's born, they're going to drink that special milk called colostrum. For the first few days, that special milk is what babies will have when they come to the breast. And then babies do very clever things. They send messages to their mums by feeding, by coming to the breast, by suckling on the breast, that develop their mum's milk supply. So babies are part of the story of breast milk and breastfeeding. They send signals to make milk. And when a baby feeds, it takes milk out of the breast, and that tells the body to make more. It's super clever. So colostrum, that first milk that baby has, we're not talking about big amounts. Babies are not glugging away. They're not having big glassfuls of milk or big bottles of milk. They're having little sips, little teaspoons of milk here and there. And that special milk doesn't just give them protein and energy, it also protects them against germs and protects them against illnesses and diseases, because breastfeeding is so much more than just food. It's also a protection against illness and disease. It's not just about milk. Lots of people think because it's called breastfeeding, it's just about food, but breast milk is so much more than that. It's also about connecting. It's also about feeling love and connection and comfort. So when babies breastfeed, it makes a hormone called oxytocin. And this is a hormone that helps us to feel connected to people that we love. So when mums and babies are breastfeeding together, they are feeling that sense of connection, and it helps the baby to feel calm. It helps the baby to feel trusting, and it helps mums to feel calmer as well. Not to say that being a new mum is always calm and relaxing. It can be stressful and difficult sometimes, but breastfeeding is going to help mums to feel calmer and more relaxed. And breastfeeding is also not just about milk, because it's also a protection against illness and disease. Breast milk is so clever. I could do a whole presentation on all the clever things that breast milk has in it. Scientists are just learning more and more about what breast milk has in it. So when babies feed, they're not just getting nutrition, they're also getting soldiers that fight against illness and disease. They're also getting special components that protect a baby, that help them to have the right development in their brain, the right eye development, skin and muscle and bone development. But that protection against illness and disease is really important, because it helps breastfed babies to be safer. It means they're less likely to go to hospital. They're less likely to get ill when they're small, and also they're less likely to get ill even years after they finish breastfeeding. Some of that protection will stay with them for the rest of their lives. Here are just a few of the clever things in breast milk. So alpha-lactalbumin is a protein that we find in breast milk that eats cancer cells. It eats cancer cells. Can you imagine if we could buy a special medicine that eats cancer cells? If we had a special, if we ate a sausage and that sausage contains something that eats cancer cells, we'd think, hey, I might as well buy that sausage. That's going to be a useful thing to eat. And that may be one reason why babies that breastfeed are less likely to have childhood cancer. Oligosaccharides are special sugars that we have in breast milk that help babies' tummies to grow friendly bacteria. Now, you probably know that bacteria is another word for the germs that we have all around us. And sometimes we think of bacteria as being bad, but we really need bacteria. Bacteria helps us in lots of ways. If we didn't have bacteria, the countryside would be full of dead leaves and dead animals. We need bacteria to help the life cycles all around us. And we also have bacteria inside our bodies, inside our tummies. And we are learning that one of the ways breast milk protects a baby is by making sure they have the right bacteria growing in their tummies, the bacteria that helps them to have a strong immune system. Did you know that if you've got friendly bacteria in your tummies in the right amounts, it not only helps to protect against disease, it also helps you to feel calmer. It also can help your mood. The friendly bacteria that live in our bodies affect us in lots of different ways. And these special sugars in breast milk aren't for feeding baby, they're for feeding those friendly bacteria. Sometimes we call it a microbiome, the world of bacteria that live inside us that help us to stay healthy. That's one of the things that's really special about breastfeeding, is that we have those lovely friendly bacteria. And the other thing that's famous about breast milk is it eats disease, it kills disease. So if you have breast milk in a cup on the table, it will have less bacteria in it after a day than it had in the first moment the milk went in the cup, because it contains things that eat the bacteria in the milk itself, living cells that eat the bacteria. So if a mom and a baby are on the bus and somebody sneezes and those sneeze germs come to baby and mum, the mum's immune system goes, aha, okay, so we've got some germs here. I'm going to make some special antibodies to protect the baby against these germs. And those special antibodies will go into mum's milk. This is what scientists think is happening. And then when the baby drinks the milk later on, they're going to get those antibodies to protect the baby against the germs. That is pretty clever stuff. So the milk that we make for our babies doesn't just stay the same, it changes hour by hour, day by day. Sometimes it'll be fattier, sometimes it might be more watery if baby's thirsty, but sometimes it will contain different antibodies depending on what germs are around and depending on what we need to protect our babies from. So here are some mums who are out and about, because as we breastfeed, we may need to breastfeed in different places. We've got a mum breastfeeding on the subway in Glasgow in Scotland. We've got a mum breastfeeding in a cafe. And let's have a listen to this mum talking about her breastfeeding.
I'm happy I breastfeed because I've normalised it for my son. So when my son grows up, or when my son goes into society and he's an adult and he sees women breastfeeding, are you going to find it strange?
No.
When you have a child, when you get older, would you want your partner to breastfeed?
Of course.
See? Normalised.
So she uses that word normalised. She says to her son, well, do you want your partner to breastfeed when they grow up? And the son says, of course I would. Daft question, Mum. Of course I'd want my partner to breastfeed, because for him, he's seen breastfeeding, he's learnt about it from his mum, and he realises it's a normal part of baby life. Oh, she wants to talk again. Hang on a sec, let me pause to that one. She's obviously keen to tell her story again. There is a lot of normal. There is so much normal when it comes to the world of breasts. Here are just 4 women. We've got Keira Knightley, who's the first picture in the black and white. And I want you to notice that her breasts are different sizes. She is a super famous Hollywood actress, and her breasts are not symmetrical. That is her normal, and that is an actress that is admired and is considered beautiful and is beautiful. Not everyone has to look exactly the same. And then the next lady across is holding the sign that says, my motivation comes from within, not from others, is Jadida Egaru. And she writes about her saggy boobs. And she says, you know what? Ever since I've had boobs, they've been saggy. And she says, saggy boobs matter. This is her natural shape. That's just the way it is. And she's proud of herself. She feels good. She feels confident. She feels happy. When she was younger, she didn't always feel great, because when she tried to buy bras, she noticed that the pictures on the boxes of bras didn't always look like her, and she didn't feel like she was made to feel very confident and happy. But then she started to accept herself, and actually now she doesn't wear a bra at all, because this is who she wants to be. Then we've got a mum breastfeeding in a cafe, looking really relaxed and chilled. And then we've got Lizzo on the end. If you don't know Lizzo, she's a talented musician. She plays the flute. She's bigger than some of the ladies we might see in billboards and magazines. And she is confident and beautiful and happy about who she is. Happiness and confidence comes from that self-acceptance, from knowing who you are. All these 4 women know who they are and feel confident about who they are. We don't all look the same. That's a really important lesson to learn. If something does worry you, don't keep it to yourself. When I did research for the breast book, one of the hardest stories I heard was from a girl who, when her breasts started to change, when she got her first breast bud, she didn't know what was happening, and she thought there was something wrong with her, and she spent a long time being very scared. But you know now how breast buds develop. You know that sometimes you might have one side developing before the other. You know that sometimes your breast might feel you might have a little lump, or you might feel a little bit tender. But if there's anything that you're not sure about, if there's anything that worries you, find someone to talk to. Sometimes society tells us that breasts are private, and that can stop us getting help. But that's wrong, because actually, if something was wrong with your shoulder, if your leg was bothering you, if you're worried about something to do with your foot, you would tell someone about that. You would talk to someone about that. If you weren't understanding something about how your body was changing, you would talk to somebody about it if it was another part of your body. So don't be shy about asking questions about breasts. There are lots of people who can help you. It might be your mum, it might be your auntie, it might be your granny, it might be your dad, it might be your friend. There are lots of people you can talk to if you're worried about your breasts. Breasts are amazing. They are so clever. Even if you're not going to be a breastfeeding mum in the future, celebrate how amazing mammals are and what clever things we can do. Our breasts can make medicine for our babies. Our breasts can help our babies to feel calm and relaxed and connected to us. They can help our babies to feel full and satisfied. They can help our babies to grow and have eye development and brain development. They can do so many clever things. We can make food with our bodies. We can make medicine with our bodies. We're going to have our breasts for a long time. They're going to be with you for the rest of your life. So it's important from the very beginning we have a good positive attitude where we talk to people if we're worried, we learn about how they work, we learn about how they develop. Don't feel that they have to be secret, don't feel they have to be private, because breasts are actually pretty darn amazing. And I hope that you have a good relationship with yours, and I hope they become your friends. And wasn't that embarrassing, some weird lady talking about breasts for half an hour? I hope you feel like you've learned something. I hope you feel like breasts aren't necessarily going to be scary. That's not to say that breast development isn't sometimes a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes it does feel a bit weird for our bodies to change. That's okay. You don't have to pretend that it's all super easy and wonderful. But breasts are something to be proud of. They are an amazing part of being a human being. And one day they could be one of the most special things in your life. So I hope you look forward to having them.